Welcome to the Take the North podcast, emergency edition. I'm David Haugh from the Mully and Haugh Show, 670 The Score. You can get this podcast on your free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast. You can watch us on 670 The Score on the YouTube page. Adam Studzinski is with us tonight. Dan Wiederer must be in a darkness retreat, but this is how unexpected this news was. Dan is certainly enjoying some time off tonight. And Adam, this is a blockbuster day. No Friday news dump. The Bears got it done. Ryan Poles makes his big move. Talk about a defining move. This is it. Ryan Poles trades the number one draft pick. The Bears coveted. The Bears celebrated. The Bears had, historically, they were heading into a draft, which first time since 1947, they were in this position. But everybody knows by now the reason we're talking tonight on a Friday, the Bears trade the pick to the Carolina Panthers. The Carolina Panthers are sitting there at number 9. They're fixated on getting a quarterback. Frank Reich is their coach. They're moving up. The Carolina Panthers to switch spots with the Bears at number 9. They give up the second round pick, number 61 overall, a first round pick in 2024, a second round pick in 2025, and wait for it, DJ Moore, number 1 wide receiver. DJ Moore, which the inclusion of a player, just like Ryan Poles suggested, that makes all the difference in the world. This is a huge deal from a fan perspective, Adam, even from your producer perspective, because you're in the business. How do you view this trade? Because I'll tell you what I think in a moment.
Well, wow. I mean, outstanding. I mean, this is about as much or even more as you were going to hope for in this kind of trade, right? Like, you know that Ryan Poles said that he knows he can get 2 first rounds. We're talking 2024, 2025 picks. So he essentially, it seems like, got, instead of a first round pick in 2025, got a second round pick in 2025 in exchange for also getting DJ Moore, which is outstanding. Like, this was never really on my radar as far as a trade back with the Panthers. I was assuming they would get a couple, if that was the case, they would get a couple first round picks, not including, the number 9 pick this year. DJ Moore coming to the Bears immediately makes their receiver room so much better.
Well, I think you're exactly right. This is what Justin Fields needs in terms of weaponry to bring out the best in his passing skills. We talk about all the time. They talk about it on the station. We talk about it on the podcast. Justin Fields needs to improve his accuracy. Justin Fields needs to do simple better. You know how you do simple better? You have weapons and guys that will, can be thrown open, that will make a bad throw a good completion. DJ Moore is one of those guys with 3,000-yard receiving yards in years in his first 5 seasons in the NFL. Here's the other thing, Adam. When you look at his contract reality, he signed a 3-year, $61 million extension a spring ago, and he's got $52 million left and 3 years remaining on that deal. You get a number 1 wide receiver, that's a pretty affordable number 1 wide receiver. Now, his cap hit for 2023 will be $20 million. That's hefty. But when you're the Bears and you've got $97 million under the cap in space, you can absorb that. You can afford to be flexible and aggressive. So I think you're exactly right. When Ryan Poles is negotiating with Scott Fitterer from the Panthers, the general manager, he may go in and say, okay, I want to switch spots. I want this year's number 1, obviously. Mm-hmm. I want a 24 number 1, obviously. And you know what? I want your first and 25. And that's how confident he was sounding. And then that forces the Panthers, if they really want to move up, to either say yes or, well, you know what? We'll give you a 2, but what do you think about taking our wide receiver, who they may not want to pay because of where they are in their rebuild? So, them having a $20 million cap hit and $52 million left, they may be at a different stage of their growth and different needs. So I think that's what changed it from getting the 2 future first-round picks that Ryan Poles seemed very confident he was going to get, including DJ Moore, including a number 1 wide receiver in the deal, helped him maybe settle for a second-round pick in 2025, even though it doesn't feel like the Bears are settling at all.
No, this is not a settle. As I said, I mean, this is about as good or better than you could hope for. And you mentioned his cap hit, $20 million this year is nothing for the Bears when they have this much money that they actually need to spend. They need to spend It's like I can't remember what the exact numbers off the top of my head, but they have to spend in cash for the season of like $100 million just to hit the floor that you need to spend for this season. So this is just part of that. And now you throw in the fact that you're getting a guy like DJ Moore who has put up some pretty damn consistent numbers despite dealing with awful quarterback play for most of his career. I mean, we're talking about Kyle Allen, Baker Mayfield, Sam Bradford trying to sorry,
Darnold,
Sam
Darnold. Yeah. Same
exactly.
guy.
Yeah,
Same idea.
Yeah. And you know, the reboot of Cam Newton that they had briefly a year or two ago in Carolina. So, and despite that, as you mentioned, he's had 3,000-yard seasons. This past season, 888 yards and 7 touchdowns. This is a dude, and he immediately makes his entire offense better. I saw a stat from Brad Spielberger of Pro Football Focus. Justin Fields led the NFL with 66.7% completion percentage on throws 10 to 19 yards down the field. Meanwhile, DJ Moore's 172 targets from 10 to 19 yards down the field in the past 3 seasons is second most in the NFL. So you immediately have a guy that is right inside Justin Fields' best abilities as a passer.
That's a great stat. Those are good metrics, and I think that's looking beyond the headlines and beyond the numbers. I also think this: when you talk about how the Bears receivers fit, let's look at DJ Moore. He's been the number 1 in Carolina, so I think he slides into that role. I think, and it's not a stretch. He's not going to be. Let's be honest here. As much as he will mean to the Bears passing game for reasons that we're talking about and excited about, he's not DeAndre Hopkins. He's not a top 10 wide receiver in the National Football League. I don't think he has to be, but I think he's the Bears' number 1. Chase Claypool is likely their number 2 or 1A. Whatever he wants to consider himself to get the most out of his ability, he can do and call himself whatever he wants. But then you have Darnell Mooney, who I think is a very competent, dangerous third wide receiver on a good passing team. Now the Bears are threatening to be a good passing team. So this is a trio that is good representative passing game for the NFL. The Bears took a huge step forward for their passing offense today, also for Justin Fields, because this is how you surround a quarterback with weapons when you want him to develop. There are a couple other issues I want to get to real quick before you want to say something else about DJ Moore in terms of what he brings to the Bears passing game.
No, I think we pretty much covered it all. Just the simple fact that this receiving core, we'll just touch on the finish on this point. Like the receiving core with the addition of DJ Moore, now you have Darnell Mooney and Chase Claypool, all of a sudden looks pretty solid, right? Like, and you allow Darnell Mooney to kind of more be a slot guy who occasionally is going to be on the outside, which I think is more his natural spot where he's going to be best. I mean, I think we talked about numerous times throughout the season. If Darnell Mooney is your 2 or 3, you're doing pretty good. And they've set themselves up to be in that kind of position.
And we always compare the Bears, or we want to compare the Bears to the Eagles. We want to see the growth in Justin Fields in year 3, the way Jalen Hurts took a step. Well, the offseason a year ago, the Eagles went and got A.J. Brown. I'm not saying that DJ Moore is A.J. Brown, but he is the Bears' version of A.J. Brown. This is their big move. This is their number 1 wide receiver that they went out and obtained and took the bold swing because they had to, because the Eagles felt like they had to. When you have a quarterback that has this kind of potential, like Hurts, like Fields, you've got to do something big and bold and aggressive. And that's exactly why I think Ryan Poles struck now with the Panthers. Now, there's the other element of the timing. Why now? I think that's an interesting and fair question. There's this school of thought that always with the draft, you wait as long as possible, even if you're on the clock. Then you go into it and you maximize the value because teams will be more desperate in theory, and they'll give you whatever you want because you're holding them up. I understand, though, why the Bears made this move now, 48 days before the draft, while they're still number 1 overall and while they're on the clock. The league year starts next week, officially on Wednesday, but free agency begins in earnest on Monday at midnight. When the clock strikes 12 on Sunday night and you spring ahead that extra hour, we're getting there faster. both the Panthers and the Bears felt like it was in their best interest to get ahead of the game. From the Panthers' perspective, Adam, I don't think we can rule out. Now, there's a lot of reporting left to be done here. This is very immediate, but it wouldn't surprise me if we learn that the Panthers had the implied threat of going out and signing a quarterback in free agency that would make them drafting one less of a reality, less of a possibility. I don't want to say it's Jimmy Garoppolo. I don't know who it might be, but it puts them in a better position now to define their path, to choose their lane. And by doing that, by trading up to get in a position to draft whoever they want, it allows the Bears also the same luxury of planning for the future, understanding where they are going to be in the draft. I don't expect them to trade down again until perhaps draft night when they're on the clock. But this makes sense timing-wise for both teams, given that Ryan Poles got all he could reasonably ask for, and it's unrealistic and I think a bit unfair if we expect him and we come back and say, well, you should have waited because you could have gotten more. I don't know that realistically you could have gotten more than Ryan Poles got from the Panthers.
No, I don't think you could have. I think this is about maxed out. You weren't going to get this much in a trade back to 2 with the Texans. You weren't going to get this much in a trade back to 4 with the Colts. You weren't going to get this much even going to 7 with the Raiders. And so this was maxing out. And you mentioned, the timing, like Carolina, I think we all expect them to most likely take a quarterback. But, if they do sign a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo, I guess that doesn't rule out them taking a quarterback. They could still take Will Anderson. I saw one, just this kind of, you mentioned like immediacy of reporting after this, like someone mentioning, Carolina could still trade back for number 1, which I think would be ridiculous. Like, I mean, imagine like you trade up to number 1 and then you're going to try to regain some of those assets and trade back to 2. I don't see it happening, but I guess we can't rule it out. But yeah, the timing wise, we talk about the timing for the Bears now. They don't have to worry about if they're signing a receiver in free agency, it's going to be a bottom of the depth chart guy that's, going to be their 4 or their 5th wide receiver. They're not going to have to worry about drafting a wide receiver now in the top 10 in all likelihood. Well, we can't rule it out, but I wouldn't expect them to at this point.
Right. I doubt it too, don't you?
Because even so, and I think that mitigates the risk. I've been talking with people about what if the Bears took Jackson Smith and Jigba if they had the number 9 pick. And I don't know if he's really worth it that high of a pick. Same with Quentin Johnson or even Jordan Addison. All these receivers have flaws. I don't know if you want to spend a top 10 pick. Now they don't have to worry about that. Now they can just take a lineman. They can take a defensive player. The options are so much more clear now that they know they have the receiver room more taken care of.
I also think it reinforces this possibility that we've talked about before. You don't want to go into the draft having it dictated to you what you need based on free agency, but it might at least influence your thought process. So, for example, we are on the verge of free agency, and we're going to be talking about this all next week on Take the North and on The Score all day long. But if Orlando Brown Jr., let's say the Bears go out and aggressively get him, or if they go out and they sign Mike McGlinchey or Jawan Taylor, somebody like that to plug in a tackle, it lessens the need for them to go out and draft Peter Skronsky at number 9 or Paris Johnson at number 9. And it opens up your possibilities, I think, to a guy like maybe it's the Texas Tech defensive lineman. Maybe it's somebody else. And let's face it, we got to explore this possibility, and we've got all kinds of time now to do that. Jalen Carter may or may not be on the board when the Bears are drafting 9th. I think that the Lions are going to be very tempted to take him when they draft at 6. But let's say that he is. The risk-reward calculus changes when you go from 1 to 9. We talk about it all the time. When you're 1, you can't have a bust. You can't afford to take a risk. You can't take that gamble on Jalen Carter. I think everybody understood that. Frankly, if I'm in the top 5, I'm less likely to take a chance on a guy that has the kind of red flags that this guy has. At 9, let's have that conversation. Let's explore this more thoroughly. Let's get the young man in front of me and us, and this time have an honest conversation about what really happened and why he reacted the way he did. And let's get to know him a little bit more, because if we have a chance to draft him, and if he's a generational talent on the football field, I want to know is this a worthwhile risk to take at number 9 to bring him into our organization? Maybe the answer is yes. Maybe it's still no. But I think that the thought process changes now that you're at number 9.
I absolutely agree with you. I think that any Bears observer, Bears fan feels a lot better about the idea of taking Jalen Carter at number 9 than you would at 1 or 2 or 4 or wherever, top 5, because of all the things that we've talked about on the podcast and everyone else has talked about the NFL. I mean, that you want, if you're picking in the top 5, you have to hit on that. It's a can't miss draft area. At number 9, it's a little looser and it's a little bit more forgivable, I guess we'll say, if he's not, if some of these other issues pan out or something else comes up, I should say, and he doesn't become the player that people expect him to be. I mean, all that being said, I mean, getting that caliber of a player, if everything off the field comes together and he plays his career as just no off the field issues, let's say, if they get a guy like that at number 9, that's generational talent at the 9th pick in the draft, and it would be an absolute steal. But again, you have to consider those off the field issues.
And let's look what the Bears, when you accumulate everything and you add it all together, they are going to get a starter in theory at number 9. They're going to get a second-round pick at 61. That guy's got to be a projected starter at some point early in his Bears career. You're going to get a first-rounder in 2024. That guy's a starter if you keep it. You're going to get a second-rounder in 2025. It's likely to be a high second-rounder, which is a starter if you keep it. And you get DJ Moore. You lost 14 games, but the what you got in reward for historically bad season was the potential to use that to put yourself in a position to get 5 starters, at least to give a shot to get 5 guys to succeed. They're not all going to pan out in all likelihood. It is a draft and it's still a calculated risk and a big gamble. But I think that when you see the way that we talked about wanting to multiply this pick and use it to your advantage and maximize the value, it's hard to see him doing a better job of maximizing the value of this pick.
Yeah, and look, right now the Bears have 3 picks in the top 61 of this draft. They're going to have 3 picks in, probably the top 60 of next year's draft as well, and at least 2 picks in probably the top 60 of the draft after that. So that right there, you and Dan have talked so much in this podcast about Ryan Poles wanting to build sustained success. That's how it starts right there. They have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 picks. And sorry, I think like 8 picks, and maybe I did the math wrong there. And through the next 3 drafts to build themselves to sustain success with young talent that are going to be on cheap contracts. And that's going to be crucial because if Justin Fields pans out in 2 years, you're going to be paying him a ton of money.
And let's face it, Adam, I mean, this also protects you if he doesn't. And that's the part of the conversation really we don't need to have. We're in the midst of celebrating this trade and where Chicago wants no part of that possibility. But, when things get sober again in town, you got to realize that this trade also, in a way, insulates Ryan Poles from Justin Fields not meeting his potential in 2023 because you know what? He's got a first-round pick in 2024. Now he's got another one. And so if things do go off the rails next year, they're likely to have 2 fairly high draft picks, and you can use them in a package if you want to move up to draft the quarterback you feel like you can win a Super Bowl with, because it's all about that. And this trade accomplishes so many things in that it gives you depth moving forward, the ability to sustain success, but also protects you against the possibility, as slim as it might be, that Justin Fields doesn't pan out.
Right. And look, the Bears are not going to be they're not going to be good next year. Even with DJ Moore and whoever they draft, they're still have so many holes to fill. We're probably talking about a 500 team this next season. They're going to be picking in the top 20 of the draft with their own pick. The Panthers aren't going to be good at all next year. They're going to have a rookie quarterback. They just traded their best wide receiver. Who knows what's going to happen with the rest of their defense? That could be a top 10 pick. And so you're going to have 2 picks in the top 20 that, like you said, you can package those together to move up even further if they feel like they need to move on from Justin Fields, or you're going to get 2 pretty damn good players in the top 20.
All right, so let's close with this thought. I think that when we talk about all week on the score, whether it was in the Mully and Haugh show or throughout the day, there was this sense that, boy, wasn't Ryan Poles talking a lot at the combine? Boy, wasn't this young general manager pretty confident for a guy just entering his second draft? Now we know why. Now we know why. And I said on Friday morning that we're going to hold him to the standard he set and the expectations that he established. 2 first-round picks in the future. And I think that even though technically he did not get that, he did not get a first and 24 and a first and 25. The first and 24, check that box. And the first and 25, I think when you add the impact of DJ Moore and the second round pick that they get in 2025, that's pretty much a wash. So I understand why he would make this deal. And if he knew he had this coming, or at least the equivalent of this kind of a haul, that's why he was smiling. That's why he was talking. And that's why he's celebrating tonight after making a deal that will define his tenure and dictate the course of the next 5 years.
Yeah, and if the book is yet to be written on what Ryan Poles' story is as Chicago Bears general manager, but this is a pretty damn good start. Getting this kind of a haul, and the first season he has, they lose 14 games. And actually, you know what? We didn't even mention this. I'll mention this real quick. It was a year ago today he traded Khalil Mack.
Was it?
Yeah, March 10th, 2022, he traded Khalil Mack. So that
happy anniversary.
Yeah, that kind of kickstarted the whole thing. And now here he is a year later. They have the number 1 pick, and he gets this absolute haul. And 14 losses is not a good start for your first season on paper, but the resulting number 1 pick and getting this kind of a haul and starting to set your team up for the future is pretty good. One last thing that I want to know before we get out of here, David, because it's one of these things that I think we're going to continue seeing the teams that passed on Justin Fields in the 2021 draft regretting it. The Panthers could have drafted Justin Fields at number 8 in 2021. They took J.C. Horn, a defensive back who has played 16 total games in his first 2 seasons in the NFL. And now here they are giving up an absolute haul to move up and in all likelihood take a quarterback.
That's a great point. That's a great point I hadn't even thought of. But how many different teams are out there regretting the fact that they passed on this guy? And now
the Jets are about to move on from Zach Wilson. Who knows what the 49ers have with Trey Lance? And yeah, it's crazy.
You've got Trevor Lawrence. You've got Justin Fields. And, hey, Mac Jones might get traded this offseason. Yeah. So the Patriots aren't exactly content with that quarterback for the 2021 draft. Good memory. Great point. This has been a lot of fun. All right, just to reset, the Bears make the deal that defines their offseason. They get they're going to draft 9th, switch spots with the Panthers, the number 61 overall pick in the second round, a first rounder in 2024, a second rounder in 2025, wide receiver DJ Moore. The Bears have made their move. Ryan Poles pulled the trigger, and we will talk about it all next week. Free agency begins midnight on Sunday. When you set your clocks ahead an hour, it gets here sooner. So by the time we're on the air Monday morning at 5:30 on the Mully and Haugh show, we may be talking about the Bears player that they signed or agreed to. Who knows? It's been that crazy an offseason. Ryan Poles swinging for the fences, and he connected today. Adam Studzinski joined us for Dan Wiederer, who is enjoying a night off. I don't think he's in his darkness retreat, but we can get him a message, Morse code style, to let him know what he missed out on. This has been an emergency podcast for Take the North. You can get us on the free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcast. You can watch us on the 670 The Score YouTube page. Thank you for listening tonight to us talk about the big trade the Bears pulled off with the Panthers.
And bear down.